You ever think about how immature your own parents are and how that might affect how mature or immature you are as a parent? Welcome to Putting on a Better Face. That's what I'm thinking about this morning. I'm Aunt Angel, ZGALA, and this is the part of the day where I contemplate what's on my mind and try to make things look a little bit better than they did inside and out before I started. And what I got on my mind this morning, as I just mentioned, is that generational aspect of like how could we be mature enough? Because there's this thing about like history moving forward, right? But then on the other side, yes, some adults are more adulty than others. Some parents are more mature and more qualified and more dedicated to the endeavor than others. And then that has an impact. I want to put on the table, first of all, that there's a lot of nuances to all of this, and as I muddle through it in my own contemplations, I don't think there's, even though I often come to what seem like conclusions or epiphanies, I don't think there's like one overarching conclusion or epiphany. It just is the way it is, right? We're doing the best we can with what we got from where we are. And I think that's important to remember. I have been listening to a book called Unbound, highly recommend. And it's about dominance and submission. And it's really speaking to me, really resonating with me. I've heard of Katya. I'm going to get her last name wrong, so I won't try to say it. But in any case, I've heard her speak a few times over the years. And I heard her speak recently on Mo Gawalt's podcast, Go Slow with Mo. And it sparked me to look up her book. And I've been really enjoying it. And she's really talking about how we, men and women, have lost touch with our needs, how these animal bodies of ours have desires and needs that we are often suppressing, and then that's leading to this passive aggressiveness and, just a lot of bad plays. And I certainly have experienced that in my life. And then juxtaposed this book with psychology, wasn't quite an article, maybe a story or something, some kind of online post that was talking about immature parents, emotionally immature parents, and how damaging that can be to the child. And I've been having a lot of waves of epiphanies the last few years about how emotionally immature my parents were, and probably still are in many ways. My father, I don't know very well at all, but he seems relatively emotionally immature. And my mother, I know really well, and she is definitely very emotionally immature. And it takes one to know one. The way I came to realize that is through my own emotional immaturity and trying to figure it out and, grow up a little and get better at relationships. And my last intimate partnership ended in a very immature way, emotionally immature way, as have many of my relationships, although this was probably felt particularly bad because I'm older now and I thought I had done a lot of maturing and we had set a foundation that seemed more mature in many ways, and yet we fell into the same pattern that has become very familiar to me in my life, and I think probably is familiar to him in his life as well. And when I reflect on what to do with that, how to transform it, how to heal it, how to, learn from it so that I can have a healthier relationship in the future, that's led me around to a familiar place, which probably many of us can relate to, which is looking at my past, my childhood, and those early attachments and bonds and traumas and how they affect the subconscious and basically get wired in as identity, as unconscious beliefs that then affect how we act, and then that impacts the relationships we have. It's pretty simple, really, and complex, really, right? So anyway, I was thinking a lot about how I want to try to become more mature in my relationships, both for myself and so that I can model that for my son and other younger people in my life, or perhaps you out there in the interweb land. But really, like this book Unbound is reminding me, it is really about meeting my own needs, taking care of my own body. And in doing that, all that other stuff works itself out just fine. The better job I can do with that in a healthy way, the better all the rest of that stuff works out. And I think that is because we are socially wired beings. Even if you feel isolated and like you're not wired like other people, or you've learned to compartmentalize or disassociate or fragment, as many of us have, and I certainly have done that my fair share, is why I can speak to it a little bit. Even then, the reason it feels bad in many ways or creates this like incoherence, this incongruence, is because fundamentally your animal body is part of a collective species that is very much interdependent. We are born helpless, little bundles of joy. I just recently got to hold a baby. It's such a joyful experience always, and reminded me how helpless human babies are, and that's really evidence of how interdependent we are just naturally, whether you think you need anybody or not, or whether you think you're wired to interact with people or not. That's just a fact of our biology. And I think many people I know, and particularly men, but many women are doing it too. Myself, I've done it to a high degree, and my mother certainly is pretty good at compartmentalizing and not acknowledging the needs of this human body. I think there's another layer of nuance that's relevant, which is that as women, our hormones get enhanced when we receive, when we know how to ask for what we need in ways that, not in manipulative, passive-aggressive ways. This is the thing that Katya, the author of this book I'm into, is doing a great job of articulating. Men and women, we would all do better if we learned to articulate our desires and needs to ourselves and each other in healthier ways, and to recognize that dominance and submission is a back and forth dance that happens between all things in life. And it's not just like when we try to segregate it to men should always be dominant and women should always be submissive, even though there are aspects of that are true, like not the always part, but there's I think that belief, that thought pattern is coming from some real important truths that do need to be put on the table and examined, so to speak. At the same time, the way we get more clear in that is by exploring dominant and submissive roles as men and women. And you could exchange that term dominant and submissive for yang and yin. And then sometimes some frameworks that helps me conceptualize it a lot more easily, because I think we get caught up in the fact that we are men and women, most of us. And I think that's creating like an issue in the power dynamics of it that is getting in the way of us meeting our desires and needs. And then the fact is that we benefit when we meet someone else's desires and needs. It feels good to do something to help someone or do something that makes someone else feel good. We all have felt that and understand that. And yet we tend to diminish our own desires and needs and criticize neediness or wanting things in each other and in ourselves in such a way that it leads to us being frankly nasty and passive aggressive and you know, I could speak just purely about me. I've caught myself throwing a temper tantrum, feeling overwhelmed by emotions because I've suppressed my own needs and desires to such an extent, and I don't have the vocabulary or the phrasing or the practice at expressing my needs in a healthy way. So they end up coming out in these very unpleasant, abrasive, angry, passive-aggressive ways. And I see this pattern in many others. Of course, it's always easier to see it in others than it is in ourselves. But I've been really working the last decade or so on flipping that around whenever I catch myself being critical of another and looking for how I can utilize that criticism, where I can find the truth of that criticism in myself, and not to beat myself up, but to transform that, alchemize it into growth and learn from it and become a little bit better. This is all part of my overarching goal. So to try to summarize all the places I went to there, I think we will all do better as society, as individuals, as men and women, to recognize that we have some basic needs and that our desires are going to arise. And if we suppress them rather than looking at them, then they're kind of going to rule us. Whereas if we start to get better at articulating our desires in a specific way and then examining how can we get those desires and needs met in a healthy way, I think we're going to have a happier time. That's my conclusion to all that. To be continued. I got a lot more to figure out on that, a lot more to say about it, and I welcome your thoughts and comments. Boy, I'm noticing a lot of my little black hairs turn white, and would you look at that? I got some silver patches coming in real quick. It is fascinating to me how things happen in ebbs and flows, and aging is like that as well. Definitely is. Let me know what you think of any or all of that or something else. It's all right. I hope you remember to put on a better face. You don't have to wear makeup, but it helps. You don't have to do anything at all, but I do think that doing what makes you feel good about yourself or a little bit better is a good plan. So I hope that you do that because you're worth it. I like to remind you to stay curious, stay courageous, stay fit, and stay free. Ciao for now. Thanks for stopping by. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment. I'll see you soon.